Hi, Martha. Hi, Amber. People are starting to join, so we're going to give everybody a few minutes to get connected. Well, it's 2 o'clock, so I think we'll get started. We have 9 people. Other people may join. I think we have 17 registered. So welcome to the August 2020 version of the Libraries Connecting Texas webinar. I hope all of you are safe. I'm in Louisiana, and I have to say I was on the safe side of the storm. I know that there are lots of Libraries Connecting Texas libraries that were in the path of the storm, and so we'll be here as a resource as we hear what the recovery is, and hopefully everyone is safe and doesn't have too much damage from the storm. So on a happier note, welcome. We're going to get started now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the LCT funding, and Kyle's going to talk a little bit about determining services. Brandy and Jenny, we're going to talk about preparing for 2021 and the Form 470. Yes, it's already time to think about the Form 470 for 2021. And then Ashley is going to give everybody a review about the competitive bidding process for E-rate. So far for 2020, $1.1 million has been funded for Libraries Connecting Texas libraries. We have 2 libraries that are still waiting for funding for 2020, and that's the Dallas Public Library and Johnson City Library. I have to say the Dallas Public Library's application is going to tack on a great bit of money to this $1.1 million, but I just have to say the smaller guys represented and did really well. We have 110 applications that have been funded for Libraries Connecting Texas. So for 2019, we have 21 libraries that have gotten all of the money they can get for their 2019 applications. 600,338.21 has been dispersed to LCT libraries for 2019. We have 19 libraries that still don't have an invoice mode set. That means either they have not submitted a BEAR, or their service provider has not submitted a service provider invoice so that they can get their discounts for 2019. So it's really important that you're looking at your bills, and for 2019, that would be services between July 1st, 2019 and June 30, 2020, to see if your service provider invoiced you sat or put the discounts on your bills for E-rate, because it's time to start working on those invoices. If the service provider hasn't applied the discounts and isn't going, and there's some communication breakdown, you should plan on filing a BEAR. We have a list of libraries that still have not completed that invoicing process, and we're going to be reaching out to you individually so that we can help you get through that process and so you can get the money that you're entitled to. I know that there are a few people who have started the process. The BEAR process requires a couple of different forms. We've already gone through that on previous LCT webinars. And we have those saved webinars on YouTube so that you can watch them. But there are a couple of forms that are required to get your invoices submitted for 2019. So please don't put it off and move forward with it. So I'm going to hand it over to Kyle now to talk about determining the services.
Thank you, Caroline. So as we move into the funding year 2021, and before we get into the determining of services, we have to discuss the new implementation of multi-factor authentication. You've probably seen this in a number of emails that we've sent out within our newsletter. And this is referring to an extra step in terms of security that the Epic portal and the Bear portal have implemented. Effectively, this means that you'll be setting up within the one portal that USAC has created an email or a text notification that will be sent to you with a passcode that you will need to use to log in to either the Epic portal or the Bear portal. We have instructions that are illustrated at the link that you see provided here at the eratecentral.com link. And we can send that to you as well if you need help in setting that multi-factor authentication up. You'll want to make sure that noreply@usac.org is added to your list of safe senders, and ensure that this will not be redirected to your spam and junk folder because you will need these to access the Epic portal or the Bear portal going forward. Additionally, there are some issues that you may see if you happen to log in to this one portal while in incognito mode on the Chrome browser. So if you do face an issue like that, just make sure that your Chrome browser is not in incognito mode, and you should be able to proceed without that issue. Moving forward, let's address the start of the E-rate timeline for the funding year 2021. We are starting off with requesting services by submitting the FCC Form 470. Now, this is not going to apply to all libraries within Libraries Connecting Texas. If you are currently in the middle of a contract of multiple years, you will not need to file a Form 470 unless you wish to upgrade your services from this year into the next year. These services would start on July 1st of 2021 at the earliest. Currently, we have compiled a list of 62 libraries that have contracts that are ending on or before June 30th of 2022. So we will be reaching out to these libraries to prompt you to start filing the Form 470, and we'll provide some additional resources as we move forward with that. If you are considering upgrading, then that may be something that you want to file a Form 470 for, especially if you find that your bandwidth that you currently receive is not sufficient for your community. Speaking of which, you want to determine what your current internet bandwidth is. And that is something that can be found on the service provider bill. If it cannot be found on there, and if you are having issues in finding it there, you may want to refer to the contract with a service provider if you have a contract. Additionally, you may want to check with the IT person or department for your library or for your city if your internet is in conjunction with the city. If you are having trouble in making this determination, please give us a call or an email, and we'd be happy to help you figure out where you're at and where you want to go with your bandwidth. And this will springboard us into the upcoming funding year here. Target bandwidth. So as it stands currently, in 2014, the FCC adopted the State Educational Technology Directors Association standards for bandwidth goals in the E-rate modernization order. TSLAC, the Texas State Libraries, has also adopted this same set of goals, and that is for libraries serving fewer than 50,000 people. The goal is to bring them up to 100 megabits per second as their bandwidth. I know a number of our libraries have already made it to this goal, you know, especially with a lot of the smaller libraries. And I think even if you're not at this 100 megabits per second and you don't think it's necessary to request 100 megabits per second, or it's not possible, you may as well attempt to request those services on the Form 470 because it's essentially a range that you request. It's not necessarily going to result in 100 megabits per second, but you'd be surprised at what could be possible in terms of the bandwidth that you can provide your library with. And then for libraries that are serving more than 50,000 people, 1 gigabit per second is the target that we have. And I know a number of these libraries could potentially rise beyond the 100 megabits per second as well, up to that 1 gig. So it's definitely worth a shot at the very least. I'll now be passing it off to Brandy, who will be discussing September action items.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just like Kyle said, thank you, Kyle, for that. We are getting into 470 season. So the next thing that we're going to be working on is your RFP preparation as well as your Form 470 preparation. So just like you said, it's time to start thinking about your technology needs, bandwidth needs, and later on in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about how our team has put together some things that will help you in that preparation and getting ready to file your Form 470. So right now is the time to start planning for your future technology needs for the upcoming E-rate year, which begins July 1st of 2021. Typically, your contract would expire on the last day of a funding year. However, there's a few instances where that may not be the case, and that you would still need to file a Form 470, and we'll talk about the details of that a little bit later on in the presentation. If you need a different bandwidth, you need to upgrade your bandwidth, or if there's a service you would like that's not a part of your current contract, you would want to consider filing a new Form 470. In preparing for funding year 2021, each year before the Form 471 filing window, the FCC approves an eligible services list. Right now we have a draft list available. The finalized ESL typically comes out towards the end of the year, but this draft is a very good reference and it shouldn't change, if at all. And so there's also listed here a glossary, the ESL glossary, which goes a little bit more in depth about, you know, the types of service and the equipment, gives you some definitions in case you don't know what those eligible services are. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit about the way that we're going to help get you prepared for the 470. We're going to send out some emails pretty soon to help you with that process. There will be a checklist that will help you to get everything done, get it done in the correct order. We're also going to ask that you complete a form. And this is going to ask for the details of your current services and what you would like to have for your upcoming services, so your bandwidth for your internet. It will also become part of the Form 470, so it's really important that the information is accurate. And now I am going to pass it on to Jenny.
Thank you, Brandy. Hello. So everything we've talked about that Kyle and Brandy have talked about has brought us to preparing for the important Form 470. It is the first form that you will file for the upcoming funding year 2021. So, you know, we're a year out, a little less than a year out before services begin. That's why it's so tricky in E-rate, is to think that far in advance as to how, you know, what it is that you need, you know, trying to anticipate those needs and, you know, in at least a 12 or 18 month plan. So, but it's something you need to be thinking about now. And once you've gathered your needs and you know exactly what services you think you might need, you know, it's not an exact thing. You know, sometimes you may be comfortable with what you have, but, you know, on the Form 470, you can request things that you don't necessarily have to buy, but that you want to see, you know, this may fit in our budget, or this may be what we need to serve our patrons. So you have to put it on there in order to get bids. So the purpose of the Form 470 is to open the competitive bidding process. That means that you will post an application in Epic. It will state the services that you're requesting bids on, what it is that you want bids on, in the Form 470, and we'll get into the details in the upcoming webinars on the 470. We'll also help you file them. But there's a section where you'll put your minimum and maximum bandwidth. You just want to be sure you're thinking, again, that 12, 18 month, 24 month out technology long range plan. What is it that you might need at that point? Even though you're at 100 megs today, you may want to be at a gig potentially in 2 years. So thinking through that, making sure your 470 reflects the need for that type of growth, just so that it doesn't limit you on your bandwidth. It may or may not be accompanied with an RFP or a request for proposal. In our case, we encourage RFPs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So now's the time to be thinking about the Form 470. We are starting to file them now. For services that are not in a contract or are delivered month to month, you don't have a contract at all with the service provider, and you just pay month to month, and potentially your rates might be variable, you will need to file a 470 every year. If you are in a contract, but your contract ends anytime before June 30th of 2022, you will also need a new 470. So the funding year 2021 runs July 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2022. So on occasion, we see contracts that end in the middle of the funding year, between that July through June 12-month period. If yours ends in the middle of the funding year of between those dates, you will probably need to file a 470. Let's talk, get with one of us. We'll help you determine if that's needed, because we don't want you without funding for any of the funding year. A Form 470 has to be posted in Epic, and it has to be available to service providers for a minimum of 28 days. That's calendar days. Once it's certified, that's pretty much it. Editable fields are just non-substantive changes. So contact changes are allowable, changing the application name. But as far as putting services in there, adding services or modifying bandwidth, that kind of thing, that is not allowable as a change. You would have to post a new Form 470. So be mindful of that. And so, like I said, we will encourage you to complete a form that we're going to send you, that Brandy said that's on the way. We're going to email those forms out soon. We'll have a checklist. We'll have a form for you to complete, and that form will become your request for proposal or your RFP. That's going to provide further information for your service providers in order to get you a bid. So it just gives them more details than the Form 470 does. and it has to be uploaded into Epic in the Form 470. So we'll make sure that those things are done together. The RFP and the 470 are prepared together, and then they need to be posted and certified together. Again, any changes made, if there's some changes to the RFP only and not the Form 470, those could potentially be done without posting a new Form 470. But we would like to make sure that we know of all the changes or corrections that you make in order to let you know if we would need to, what we need to do. If we need to repost a new 470, if we need to restart the 28 days, or if we can just make the correction and re-upload it into Epic. I said that very fast, and again, we will have another competitive bidding discussion next month, but this is to get the wheels turning and get you thinking about things. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. And we do have a goal right now. We would like to see everybody complete their 470s, get them certified in Epic by Thanksgiving. So still a couple months out, but we would like to see if we can't reach this goal. This will take a lot of pressure off you after Christmas when the 471 window opens. So that is November 26th. And now I am going to pass it over to Ashley Brown.
Thank you, Jenny, and good afternoon. So I want to talk about the fun part, and that's the competitive bidding process and what the do's and don'ts are of that. One of the important things is that we have to remember is that all bidders must be treated the same. So what that means is that you can't provide bidders with advanced knowledge of the project or answer questions for one bidder but not for everybody. You need to make sure that all bidders have enough details to know what's required of them, and that's why we like to provide you the service spec sheet or the RFP sheet that we're going to send out to you. That way you've given them enough details to provide you with a bid. And then of course, making sure no secrets are allowed. What you've provided to one bidder, you need to make sure you provide with all. And of course, one of the main things is making sure that the price of eligible services is the most heavily weighted criteria on your matrix when you do your evaluations. And what that means is making sure that you can't have the points value weighing the same. So price can't be 30 points and past relationship can't be 30 points. Price has to be the most heavily weighted on that. Another thing here is that we want to make sure all applicants avoid conflicts of interest during the competitive bidding process. And an example of that would be when you have an applicant's board member who's associated with a service provider, whether they're an employee or an owner or their husband works for somebody, and that service provider is then selected or the board member is involved in determining the services that you are requesting and or helps select that service provider on your application. That could be considered a conflict of interest, which could cause problems for you during the funding process when USAC begins review of your application. Another thing is the value of any free service. For example, price reductions, promotional offers, or free products, they generally must be deducted from the pre-discount cost of your funding request. And this comes from the Free Services Advisory, which means that applicants and service providers cannot subsidize the procurement of ineligible or unrequested products and services, or from participating in arrangements that directly or indirectly reduce the applicant's non-discounted share. So we want to make sure that we watch out for that. Then there are some limited exceptions to where service providers and or potential service providers cannot give gifts to applicants. Gifts are defined as favors, entertainments, loans, or anything else of value. So I want to go into talking about what the gift rules are and what that means. Exceptions to the gift rules include items worth $20 or less from one source one service provider, one event, one time. For the year, you can combine the value of those items, but they may not exceed $50 from one source during that funding year. For example, a service provider has a conference and you go to it twice because they have one in the fall, one in the spring, and so you want to go both times, and they're offering door prizes or meals. You have to make sure that at the first conference you didn't accept anything over 20, and at the second one the same, to where they don't go over that, exceed that $50. And here's just some gifts which included or but not limited to in gifts that you've received, which would be like attending seminars, marketing calls, loans of products, which could include on-site product demonstrations. For example, if somebody wants to demo a UPS and they leave it for over a month, if you were to do cost allocations, that's probably going to be over the $20 limit. So you want to just make sure to watch out for those. And then, of course, services, equipment, or trainings, any meals and or prizes at conferences. If they're worth $20 or less, you can accept. However, it is best practice for you not to accept any gifts at any time. And the reason is you have to record all gifts received. You need to keep track of those things, document them. And if you're ever suspected of any violation of maybe the fact that you find out the retail value is more than the $20, you just want to make sure that you return the item, dispose of it, or pay the donor its market value. And then, of course, as well, you need to keep record that you did either return it, dispose of it, or pay for it, just in case there are any questions. There is one exception right now to the gift rule that we should talk about, and it's due to COVID-19. The FCC granted a temporary waiver of the gift rule. It's currently in effect through September 30th of 2020. And what that means is that they are waiving the $20 and $50 amount, stating that the acceptable gifts could include, but are not limited to, free upgrades to connections, connected devices, equipment, and or other services that support remote learning for students and teachers who will be taking classes and or utilizing internet access, providing instruction from home as a result of COVID-19. I will say that there is a push to extend this waiver through the end of June of the end of the funding year 2020, but that would go through June 30th of 2021. However, that has yet to be determined. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and let Caroline close.
So I'm just going to reach out and see if anyone has any questions. If you do, then you can click the raise hand button and I can let you speak, or you can type your questions in the chat. We're here to answer any questions that you have regarding either the things that we talked about today or any other E-rate item that you might be wondering about. And this is a good opportunity because everybody who's on the call can benefit from the answers to your questions. So there's no stupid question. If you have any questions, please do ask them. I don't see anybody raising their hands though. I hope everybody is well and that you haven't received damage or have any injuries due to the storm. Wishing everybody luck. If you have any questions that maybe you didn't want to ask today, we're here. You can always send an email to lct@eratecentral.com, or you can give us a call at 516-801-7820. That number goes to all of us, so somebody should be able to answer your questions. Our next call is scheduled for September 24th at the same time, and we'll be sending out the link to register for it. And we also are going to be posting a recording of this webinar with the other webinars on YouTube as usual. I don't see any more questions, so I'll let you all go. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.